We're back at the Texas Cemetery in Austin, Texas for episode 2 of the Texas Generals, presented by the Texas Division of the Sons of Confederate Veterans. Hi, I'm Johnny Anderson, Chief Research Officer of the Civil War Project and member of the Sons of Confederate Veterans. In episode 2, we'll profile the life and career of General Adam Rankin Stovepipe Johnson, who was one of the 9 Confederate generals buried here. General Johnson didn't command a large army like Albert Sidney Johnston or John Bell Hood. His service in the war between the states was primarily in command of partisan rangers behind Union lines. And while that service is certainly heroic, he's being profiled more for his significant contributions to the state of Texas after the war. So sit back and enjoy episode 2 of the Texas Generals. And if you do, give us a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel. Adam Rankin Johnson was born in Henderson, Kentucky, on the banks of the Ohio River on February 8, 1834, to Dr. Thomas Jefferson Johnson and Juliet Spencer Rankin. As a boy, he loved the outdoors, becoming an expert shot, and at night he enjoyed reading, especially histories, biographies, and tales of adventure. At the age of 12, he was already managing a drugstore for Ira Delano, where he learned business. And at 16, he was put in charge of 80 men older than he was at Burbank and Barrett's tobacco business, which taught him leadership. At the age of 20 in 1854, Johnson moved to Texas, settling in Hamilton Valley, which later became Burnet, Texas. There he met a party of surveyors who taught him how to survey. Johnson, along with his dog and his horse Joe Smith, spent the next 5 years surveying the frontier. At the same time, Comanche Indian attacks were increasing along the frontier, despite the presence of U.S. troops stationed at Fort Croghan and other frontier Texas forts. So Johnson became an expert Indian fighter, where he learned the skills of concealment, subterfuge, and deception, which he would put to use during the war. His Indian fighting skills also earned him a contract to drive the overland stagecoaches and to manage the overland mail stations from Burnet to as far west as the Pecos River. But by December of 1860, the overland routes were moved north and all of his stations were closed. On New Year's Day in 1861, Johnson married Josephine Eastland in Burnet, Texas. Josie and Adam would have 9 children between 1866 and 1884, 7 of which would reach adulthood. When Texas seceded from the Union, Johnson returned home to Henderson, Kentucky to visit his family. For Johnson, the Civil War really was a war of brother against brother. 2 of his brothers fought for the Union, and 2 fought for the Confederacy. In Hopkinsville, he met Colonel Nathan Bedford Forrest and offered his services as a scout. Using the skills he learned fighting Indians, Johnson was able to easily make his way behind enemy lines to ascertain their strength and movements. While scouting for Forrest, as Fort Donelson was about to surrender, Forrest decided to move his troops south to Nashville, and it was Adam Johnson and Bob Martin, another scout who Johnson would serve with throughout the war, who would lead the way through the swamp and escape. Johnson, Martin, and another scout, Frank Owens, would spend much of 1862 scouting behind enemy lines. But Johnson is best known for his capture of Newburgh, Indiana on July 18, 1862. While staying at the Soper Farm in Hendersonville, Kentucky, Johnson learned that there were hundreds of farms in Newburgh, Indiana, across the Ohio River. Gathering a handful of men, Johnson, Martin, and Owens moved to a point directly across the Ohio from Newburgh. There, using his knack for deception, they fashioned Quaker guns using a pair of old wagon wheels, a discarded stovepipe, and a charred log, and pointed them over the bank to the building holding the arms. With Felix Aiken, Bob Martin, and Frank Owen, he quietly rode across the river, went at once to the arsenal, and began to barricade the doors. But hearing a disturbance at the Riverside Hotel nearby, he left Martin to get the arms, while he walked into the hotel and found 80 men with their rifles cocked and ready to fire. He walked right among them, telling them that no one should be hurt if they put down their guns before his men came. They stacked their arms. Leaving them with Martin as guard, he faced the Home Guards gathering outside. By this time, the captured guns were well on their way across the Ohio. He addressed the commander. "I came here to get these guns. I have them, and I propose to keep them. I want nothing more, and I do not intend to disturb any of the citizens or any of their property. But if I'm hindered or fired upon, I'll shell this town to the ground." And he pointed to the terrible Quaker guns. Martin, with his last load of guns, was soon crossing the river, and Johnson, with his 2 bodyguards, walked quickly down and pushed off into the river unmolested. From that time forward, Johnson was known as Stovepipe Johnson. Eventually, Johnson's troop grew to 300 men and were called the Breckinridge Guards, or the Texas Partisans. The North didn't recognize his partisans as Confederate soldiers, so Johnson petitioned the War Department to organize his forces into a Confederate unit and to provide commissions to his company commanders. So on November the 4th, 1862, Johnson was appointed colonel of the 10th Kentucky Cavalry, retroactive to August the 13th. In May of 1864, Johnson was ordered on a clandestine mission to western Kentucky to assess local sentiment and to recruit an army to liberate Confederate POWs. On June the 1st, 1864, he was promoted to Brevet Brigadier General. With a small group of officers, he arrived in western Kentucky in August and issued a recruitment proclamation that resulted in 1,700 new recruits. His plan soon went awry when Northern spies determined his intentions and began moving troops to stop him. On August 21, 1864, while leading a charge on a Federal encampment at Grubb's Crossroads, Johnson was shot by friendly fire in the right eye, with the round exiting his left temple, leaving him blind in both eyes. He was left at the home of Garland Sims, where his injury was attended. He was ultimately taken prisoner and moved to Fort Warren in Boston Harbor. At Fort Warren, Johnson refused to be exchanged for a Federal officer, but as the war was coming to a close, he was finally exchanged. According to his amnesty and pardon application, he was retired from service on March the 23rd, 1865. He turned down multiple offers of free land in Kentucky and decided to return to Texas, which he did in September of 1865. Reconstruction had had such a devastating effect in Burnet that he and Josephine decided to move to Llano County. After 4 years, Josephine persuaded him to move back to Burnet, build a new house that they called Airy Mount, and open a store to sell goods below the high prices that Reconstruction had brought. He also opened a land office and ran that office for 13 years. In 1886 and 1887, Johnson realized a 30-year dream to build a town on the Colorado River. Marble Falls was laid out, plotted, and the town lot sold. The little city sprang up and quickly became known as the Blind Man's Town. Among other endeavors, Johnson recruited investors and built a successful cotton mill and the first college in Marble Falls. Johnson knew that the town needed a railroad to become a growing city. Shortly before a trip to Austin to lobby the legislature for a railroad, the state capitol burned, and the legislature decided to build a new capitol made of Texas stone. Granite Mountain, located just outside of Marble Falls, was the repository of a beautiful red granite. Johnson convinced the legislature to use the granite from Marble Falls and to build a railroad to transport it after donating 4 miles of right-of-way from his holdings in Burnet. A new capitol opened to the public in 1888, built with 4,000 train carloads of red granite from Marble Falls, thanks to the efforts of Adam Rankin Johnson. Brigadier General Adam Rankin Johnson died on October the 20th, 1922. He lied in state at the Texas Senate Chamber in the Capitol that he helped build 34 years earlier. He's buried in the Texas State Cemetery, one of 9 Confederate generals buried there. Josie died less than a year later on September the 11th, 1923, after 61 years of marriage, and is buried next to him.